probably in the interest of time, and we did tell people in the town we'd start at 6:30 and take comments. I suggest we proceed. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. But before we start, I'm going to have this memorized by the end of this, but I have to read the following provision. I'm saying this in my sleep these days. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Medfield School Building Bylaw Review Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. All votes subject to remote participation will be taken as a roll call vote, and the meeting is being recorded. This order has been extended through July of 2022. I'd just like now to go through the group, and if people could say their name and just confirm that they're participating remotely. So I'm Bob Morrill, and I am participating remotely. Cynthia? I think you're on mute.
Cynthia Green, remotely.
Thank you. Sarah?
Sarah Lemke, participating remotely.
Russ?
Russ Hallisey, participating remotely.
And Carolyn?
Carolyn Casey, participating remotely. Sorry I'm late. It wouldn't let me in for some reason.
Oh, no problem.
Reloaded twice.
I mentioned before he came on, Tom Marie is traveling for business and sent me a note that he did not think he'd be able to make it tonight. So I think this is our group for the evening. And we do have a quorum. Okay, what I wanted to do, just start really quickly, I want to thank Sarah and Carolyn for the materials they prepared and sent out to the group. I'm sure that was a tremendous amount of work, and it's much appreciated. It will certainly help us as we have our discussion tonight. I also want to thank the members of the town who have submitted written comments to us. And I want you to be assured that when those come in, we are notified that they have been posted, and the committee is reading those and taking them into consideration. So those that are sharing information, thank you. You are being heard. So with that, we are going to turn, the first part of the meeting was for public commentary. And I think the ground rules we established was that we were going to ask people to limit their comments to 2 minutes. And not so much direct questions to the committee, but rather if there are things that you think really are important that we should be considering or including in whatever we end up proposing, we'd love to hear from you. So Brittany, I assume you can, I'm sorry, Russ, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's nobody sitting in the wings.
We have actually
one.
Oh, wait
Yeah,
a minute. There is one. Chris Potts.
Yep. So I think with the way we're going to do it is in Q&A, just put your name and address, just so we have a record of that. And then if you wish to speak, and then I will promote you to speak.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yep.
So who's first?
So that means Chris needs to put her name and address in the Q&A section, right, Brittany? So if Chris will do that.
Maybe she doesn't have a question. She did send us the.
Oh, no comments. Email was it. So I was going to suggest, because I didn't see anybody yet, I was going to suggest that we take a quick look at the 2 emails that came in at the last minute, and maybe we could address. One was from Megan Sullivan and the other one was from Chris Potts. Just to see if anything they said in the emails leads us to want to consider anything.
Do you want to start with Megan Sullivan?
Sure.
So her first comment was she supported the idea of having a planning board member. So I don't think there's anything required to talk about there. And then her second point, I'm just paraphrasing for those who haven't read it. She thinks there should be an official permanent member of the committee who is specifically charged to represent the interests of the town relating to sustainability and the town's goal to be net zero by 2050. and should be a member of the Energy Committee. I think I'm just taking, do you want to just discuss each point as we go?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think on that point, our notes, and I haven't had a chance to digest Carolyn's points, but one of the people who we had talked about being appointed was someone who had energy experience. Right.
We did, and then we were talking about that probably anybody with building experience currently does have that. And I did take the words right out of the current bylaw, right, with describing who, but I'm wondering that maybe it would be clearer if we actually listed that in, like.
And actually, if you like, I'll share my screen, and we can talk about edits on the fly. Hold on, I'm sharing. Am I sharing the right one? What can
Yeah.
you see?
Yep, you're no, the right one.
Okay, so you can see SBC. I have too many things up on my own computer. So you can see SBC shall consist of.
Yep.
Okay, so and I what I did, Carolyn, was cut and paste your section into the place
Yeah,
where
thank you. That's
then-
perfect. Yeah.
and then I just reformatted it to make it like sub bullets.
Right.
So I think I think it would be in this
Yes.
section.
Right, because that is the wording from the current bylaw, and that's what we had been discussing, what are all the possible skills someone could have? But we could put it right in that piece and just say it out in a clear way. I mean, we could actually say a member from the Medfield Energy Committee, right? We could.
So one voice of concern on that is, I don't know how broad that committee, what their experience is when we have a limited number of people on the school building committee. Could we make it just a general, among the criteria that should be represented are people with knowledge of, and not just limited to a member of the committee?
In this part.
We have also talked about this in the last 2 meetings. We have put
Yeah.
energy in here, so it absolutely should be in here. I'm on the energy committee. I know exactly how much work they did to, on the last round. And we absolutely need to have someone who has the energy expertise there. And we shouldn't assume that somebody who is in the building trade would have that. They may not.
So
And-
could we do it as someone with expertise in the energy issues, but not mandate that it be a member of the energy board?
Yeah, so there's 2 pieces there. One is
Yeah.
someone has the knowledge, but then what about what Medfield's trying to do? So meshing the
That's right.
knowledge with Medfield, right? And the things that they're currently trying to do, whether it's the schools or the towns or the other buildings or the hospital or whatever the case may be.
Right.
I would be in favor of leaving it more broad, like Bob was pointing out, because what if like the energy committee ever disbanded? I think it's, seems unlikely, but you never know. It's not a required board like that has to exist like the planning board or the warrant committee. But I would expect that person would not only be knowledgeable about energy issues, but would make themselves aware of what Medfield's energy goals were. So we could be specific in that respect, say someone with energy knowledge and knowledge of Medfield's energy goals. But I don't know if I need to be tied to someone on the energy committee itself. How do you pick who it is? What if the energy committee doesn't exist?
So what if after that sentence you just highlight, Sarah, before it says no current serving member, it's like, what if we added a sentence there? I don't know who we strongly suggest, but I don't know who the we is. It is strongly suggested that a member of the SBA include someone with, and do you want to call it green energy experience, or you just call it conservation and energy experience, and in particular knowledge of Medfield's current focus?
So Cynthia, you're on the energy committee. How would you articulate your core mission? If we were going to say someone should have expertise in X, what is that expertise?
Green energy sustainability measures, and I think including the town's goals to meet net zero.
maybe we should leave out 2050 because this bylaw could live longer than that.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that date may change, so.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think I put this in parenthetical rather than commas. What do you think about just adding it in as one of the three? One of this, I mean, the way it's written, what I put on the screen means they could pick 2 people with architecture, engineering, and municipal construction and not energy. If we want to make it mandatory that energy is covered, then
I think we
say-
should, because this is, as I mentioned the last time, this really gets into the operation and maintenance of a building. If you build it so that it's energy efficient or net zero, you're going to have less costs going forward.
And I also was wondering when I was doing the town moderator, so we have 2 appointments there and we talked about building experience, but do we want to copy this and put it under the town moderator? Are we saying the town moderator can pick anyone? Or do we also want to suggest that those 2 other appointments include people with these kinds of experiences?
I think, before I want to talk about that, Carolyn, I think that's a good point. But before we leave here, what about 2 appointments will be residents with expertise in architecture, building, engineering, construction, and at least one has to have green energy sustainability experience.
So here's my concern with that. I don't know enough about how the architecture and building people work. And is that too narrow of a field to say someone just has to be in the green energy zone? I mean, I don't.
No, because a lot of architects now are what they call LEED certified or other green and sustainability certifications.
How about if we went back to 3 appointments with those construction qualities and then add language, and at least one of which shall also include this type of something you want to include?
I'd like that better, where we're saying that, among the expertise we want is that, but that is not sort of in and of itself a category, right? I mean.
Well, then I refer back to Cynthia, whether the people who you think of as the experts in that would also have architecture, engineering, construction, or construction law experience as well. I don't think construction law.
No, I mean, they
No.
could, but
Are they all engineers or architects?
most of them are, somebody outside of the architecture and building engineer. So, I mean, I think the way, with sustainability does it.
Well, how is that different than saying there will be, 3 of them who are residents with the following expertise, and that is one of the other criteria. So by definition, you have to have somebody with that expertise.
Well, I think the problem with saying 3 including is it isn't mandatory that any one of them be energy the way I had it drafted, because there's more than 3 categories. So they could grab architecture, engineering, and law as your 3 without hitting, and Cynthia was suggesting a preference toward, and originally the commenter of the public, having someone with energy experience as a mandatory.
And I think that makes sense.
I don't disagree. I think 2 people who you could get, 1 architect, someone with municipal construction experience, and an energy person, and that would be a pretty good group of 3 in my mind.
I won't battle over it. We can vote. I would probably vote against it just because I think it's too narrowing, but I completely defer if the consensus of the committee is to include it. But.
Well, why don't we highlight this and go to Carolyn's other point about whether any of the the moderator people should have any expertise, or whether they can just be general residents. One of them is already a senior citizen who may or may not have any relevant experience. Their role is to be there as the senior citizen voice.
Right.
So for the other 2 at-large town residents? Do we want to put any suggestions about what those people's experience is, or are these just interested residents?
So, you could take the wording that the selectmen have, but instead of saying will be, you could say it is suggested, which then gives you possibly, somebody else, right, with the expertise, maybe in the construction law or contracts or building somehow.
So actually, I just want to, before we go to other parts of your draft, did we want to continue and finish with the email from the public?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only question I had is if that, yeah, we can do that. I was wondering if that would sway your opinion, Bob, if the moderators people had experience. If we can come back to it.
Yeah, I have the same question, Bob. If we had it in two places, which means there's more people with the expertise to pick from, are you more comfortable then when we say at least one with the green energy, sustainability?
Yeah, maybe. And I'll be totally upfront. Again, I'm not going to make a big battle over this. A lot of it's coming from ignorance. I just don't know enough about when you actually we're setting definitions. I don't really know what it looks like when you have to do it. And I'm worried that if we highlight one in that manner, does it create problems? But that may be an invalid concern. But that's where I'm coming
Okay.
from.
Well, let's go
Yeah.
to the next point in the email then.
Could we
Yeah,
just
so
add energy into this list so we're consistent? Pertinent areas of architecture, energy, building engineering.
I'm just gonna put a note and we can come back to it.
Thank you.
Well, I kind of thought that we were talking about residents at large, not really being builders or whatever, but just general residents representing the general community on this.
Yeah, we maybe, let's come back to that. Let's
Back
just
to it.
table. I think that was something we talked about, Russ, so
Yeah.
a fair point. Let's go back to Megan's email. And by the way, we still don't have anyone ready to offer comment based on the Q&A at least.
Well, it's a good thing we limited it to 2 minutes.
Yeah. We do have one more attendee. Now we have two. So Permanent Building Committee was the next comment. And the comment is, it seems you've gone to great lengths to prevent the PVC from having a role. This seems to be an unfortunate overreaction. I'm reading. Overreaction to the recent project. As long as the Permanent Building Committee in their role includes H, the committee in consultation with the town facility manager shall be responsible for assessing the current conditions of town facilities and projecting their useful life. The committee is responsible for projecting the need to replace buildings. At least one member of the MSB committee should be required to be a member of the PBC. This will allow for a good understanding of system and material choices. The commenter actually lost me a little at the end.
Yeah,
When I'm not clear whether the person was saying that one of the school building committee members should be on the permanent building committee or vice versa.
I don't know what the MSB committee is.
I think it's what we're calling the SBC. I think,
Yeah,
I think she means
National
Medfield
School-
School Building Committee. But we did actually talk about the fact that the select people, when they choose people with expertise, could choose someone from the permanent building committee. So we didn't say it had to be, but we did put it in there as a possibility. I would have two thoughts about, or maybe one, about putting it there saying it has to be. So it's unlikely that we have two projects going on at town at the same time. We tend to do one and then another one. But if we did, and it wasn't a school building, then that permanent building committee is, is busy with maybe a town building. And that seems to me a lot to be on the school building committee and on the permanent building committee with some town facility. Because it's not a huge committee. However, I mean, we can, again, put in it's suggested or there's no reason not to ask them if they wanted to be. I just don't know if there's a pro and con to a have to be.
The only
And
reason, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ross, please.
The only reason I had suggested it at one of our earlier meetings was I see a value in somebody who has been serving on the Permanent Building Committee as having experience in Medfield for building in Medfield. And it's sort of that experience that I would see as a value, as opposed to just, oh, well, one of the members of the Permanent Building Committee is an architect. I don't see drawing from them on the individual expertise that we're looking for. So my only thought was, if we wanted to suggest that we have to have somebody from there, it would only be for the value of experience in town.
Okay, that's a good point. That's what you're looking for from the person, which is helpful, right? Because what if nobody else has had experience with building in town, all the other people who are part of it?
And I kind of look at this, maybe there's a broader issue, how tightly do we want to define what has to be done and how much do we want to give guidance and trust our elected officials in the form of the town moderator and the select committee
Yeah.
to pick people. And I mean, I would think it would occur to them to have someone on that committee take part if appropriate. I don't know that we need to mandate it. I'm not opposed to it either. I just don't know that you need to do that. I think that might be an obvious consideration.
Just to add to the original commenter's point about the Permanent Building Committee being responsible for the kind of maintenance of all the buildings and looking ahead, I think what we talked about as a group was amending their bylaw to remove school buildings. So just as a side note, it would no longer be under the Permanent Building Committee's jurisdiction to worry about school buildings. So I don't think it's problematic for us to not have a Permanent Building Committee member so that they can oversee the status of school buildings. Whether we want to include one of them, to Russ's point, for historical kind of acumen about how the town builds buildings is a different question. But I think one of the commenters' points was that the Permanent Building Committee wouldn't really be doing its job if it didn't have someone on the SBC. And I don't think I agree with that based on how we're planning to move forward.
Who do we have in the non-voting members? Any of those people help us out here?
We have
I'd just like
super-
to interrupt you for 1 second. In the
Sure.
Q&A, there is, Chris did offer a comment or would like to speak publicly if you guys are.
Could we wait maybe until we get done with Megan's comments?
Yep,
And
I
then-
just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure you guys saw it.
Yes, I
Thank
think she wants to also comment on the moderators people. So sticking for a second on the Permanent Building Committee comment. So we have, Cynthia, non-voting
Yeah.
members, the superintendent, the principals, the town administrator. We don't have like a facilities person. Does the town have like a
Yes.
facilities manager? So
Yes.
that was something that was in the Permanent Building Committee language that I put at the end of like things to consider, wherever that was. Yeah, the Permanent Building Committee consults with the town facility manager. Should we incorporate this concept and have the town facility manager be an ex officio non-voting member?
I think we should, and her comment is a good one on this, because they're gonna know overall in the town, what is going on in the different buildings, and there may be some pertinent information from one building to another.
Can I just add in here, we were looking at this, Christine and I, it's the director of facilities is her title, because there are multiple titles under the facilities. So just to make sure that's the correct title.
And can I just say, does this person actually, are they involved with the schools now? Because it used to be that that there was a school person who was in charge of the facilities of the school.
That's right, but she is,
Not the town.
yeah, so, we go forward every year with a Green Communities grant, or we're trying to every year, and she assessed the school as well to try and figure out what needs to be done.
Okay, but beyond that, is she involved in the capital projects they decide they want? For
Yes,
the buildings? Okay.
yes.
So somebody made a comment that the Permanent Building Committee we would draft some language so that they would not be responsible for the buildings. But aren't they going to be responsible for the buildings after they've been built? Because when the building is built, we no longer have the school building committee in existence. So that will be over.
Well, wouldn't that then go over to the town director of facilities to manage the facilities?
I don't know.
Well, that's what I was saying before, like currently, that if that's what they're doing currently for our 5 buildings, managing facilities, checking, that kind of, then it works fine, right? As long as.
Yeah, we need to confirm how it's working, but that's my understanding.
But if there was going to
Maybe
be,
we should leave that as an open point, something that we need more information on and discuss at our
Yeah.
next meeting.
yeah, because I don't think that the facilities manager is going to be responsible for repairing or, expanding a building, renovations. I think that would be the permanent building committee would assume that once the building has been built.
Well, I would assume if you were going to renovate or expand, you'd actually have to put your school building committee together again. School committee would have to vote on that, come back,
Yes.
ask the
Yeah,
town. And
the
put
way
the
we
school building committee
drafted
together again.
the way we drafted the intro, which was based on the permanent building committee language, was it's not just new construction, it's alterations, enlargements. So they'd be back in front of the school building committee, unless
Okay.
it's routine maintenance, which then I think we should confirm, but I think that is under the director of facilities jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, she'll put in saying, the schools need new roofs. So,
Okay. So we
Can
need
we
to
go
follow
back
up on that.
to- I was just gonna say, is there, just before we move off this section, is there any objections to having the town director of facilities as an ex officio member?
My only concern is if we get too many people on the committee, it becomes unwieldy. So, I want to give, that is my concern. If it gets too big, it's problematic.
Could that person be the town administrator's designee? So, because I can't see them needing to be there for all of the meetings. I can see them a lot in the beginning, but there might be a time you'd really want your finance person there, or the town administrator or assistant or something. So I just wonder, we have in it or designee, can we maybe in parentheses say financial town facilities manager, and they could bring the person or persons as needed, depending on where they are in the process and the agenda.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Does anyone know what the finance person's title is? Is it director of finance?
For the school department?
No, when you mentioned Carolyn, the town administrator might send
Yeah,
their.
what is the town side finance person called? I don't know. Maybe Brittany, do you know?
The account, there's a town accountant. And there's also a
Really so
town
much in it.
treasurer.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
that's
maybe
another TBD.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it may just be that the
there's-
decision-making on finance issues goes through the select board and town meeting, so that the people who are responsible on the town employee side are really executing more than they're doing sort of strategy. I
Right.
wouldn't think an accountant isn't applicable.
so the
Yeah.
title is Director of Finance and Operations.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Michael LaFrancesca.
So that's
Okay.
on the school side.
Is he the school or the town?
He's school.
He's school, yeah.
Yep.
Which I would assume the superintendent would be bringing him at various
Right.
times.
Yep.
So is there a townwide director of finance?
No.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, when
then
I
there
looked
you
it up,
go.
that's what came up.
Okay. So it could be town administrator, assistant, it could,
Yeah.
it could be the,
We could just list director of facilities. It says may include, it doesn't need to be an exhaustive list. Just wasn't
Yeah.
sure if there was anybody that we wanted to list further.
right. No, that would make sense. I'd put it there and then,
Okay.
So here's my other question about that. The way we wrote it, does that mean the town administrator could come and the facilities manager? Could they both come for a meeting? Or is it either or?
It says or, but they're
Maybe it
not.
should be and/or, yeah.
But couldn't there be a situation where maybe both were needed? So I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
same thing for the superintendent, because you would want
Yes.
him
Same
or
thing.
her
He may
and their
want-
facilities
yeah.
person.
Yep, he may want the money person there. He or she may want the money person there. Yep.
Since we're on this section and we could probably close it out pretty quickly, does anyone think the principal needs to have a designee? Just the principals.
I don't think so, because our schools just, I mean, we do have, at the high school level, we have vice principals, but we don't have it at the elementary, so.
I think we leave it at just the principals too. I just wanted to confirm.
I would think that the committee could at any time invite other individuals at any, future meeting to come to participate, to ask for input. I don't necessarily think we need to have that be called a designee. I thought the designee was if the town administrator couldn't be there, he or she could send somebody in their place to act on their behalf.
I'm not sure it makes a big difference. Is it? I mean, if they want to do either.
Do you want to say the town administrator and his or her appointed designee to cover the fact that they may not be able to go to meetings, but then say the town administrator shall consult with the town director of facilities? So put it on the town administrator to be working with the facilities, director of facilities, but not make it the person's designee or a required non-voting member.
I think that's a great idea. We'll consult with and/or may appoint as a designee. So there's both consulting and they could designate them for a particular meeting.
Yeah, I would, yeah, I'd like to see them do both. I mean, I certainly would want this person to come if it was helpful for the committee.
To some degree, again, I don't know how much of this we need to legislate, right? I mean, the people that will be doing this presumably would be thinking of these things and soliciting input as needed. I'm not
Like I
sure how
said,
much we need to
always
hardwire.
invite people to participate as consultants or, helpful.
Non-voting members, superintendent, their designee, the principal and their designee, the town administrator and her designee. I'm not opposed to it, but I think if I was writing it, I would just end after appointed designee for the town administrator and, if they know what they're doing and if they're doing their job, they should be consulting with the appropriate people. And if they're not, hopefully there's enough other people involved that will be asking, what we should hear from the director of facilities. I don't know that we need to.
And they certainly can invite people. I mean, that's a fair point. You certainly can have people come to the meeting to, to
Yeah.
ask about stuff.
I would just as soon leave it the way we had it and let the committee bring people in as they need them.
Agree.
Any objection?
I guess the only question is, I kind of agree with the commenter that, we need to make sure that there is consistency across all buildings as far as, knowledge of what's going on within the town. Which, I think by adding that in with the town administrator, we'll consult with the director of facilities. And yes, I would think they would, but it makes it clear that we expect them to if we put it in here.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you, Cynthia. I also don't have an objection to them being a non-voting member. I don't think 16 is too unwieldy compared to 15, but I also don't know that they need to participate in every single meeting. There may be things that aren't relevant to them, so a consultation with them satisfy me as well.
Okay.
All right. So other comment was about the warrant committee member? Or was that
Oh,
on
yeah.
Chris's?
No, that, I think let me just confirm, but I think we're done with Megan. So the planning board supported the planning board member being a participant. The comment about the energy, which we have a placeholder to come back on, whether it's one of the three or whether it may be one of the three. The permanent building committee members' participation, which I think we sort of talked around, but did we decide amongst our group that we don't think we need someone? Are we in agreement on that?
I just think the select people could appoint somebody.
Yes, but we're not going to make it mandatory. I
Yeah,
think we had sort of decided that last week, so just confirming.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, then comment number 4 was the director of facilities.
I just do want to say, and I don't know if we have to write it in here, but I just want to say clearly that by not listing them out, we're not somehow saying that they're not important or needed or have something to
Right.
contribute.
Right.
So I don't want it to be misinterpreted. That's my only piece here. I don't want it to be misinterpreted. It's just that I think the moderating and select board get to choose people, and they could certainly tap that. That's a resource for them to tap.
Yeah.
I agree, Carolyn, and I think I'm saying the same thing, but the concern with the more specific you get, then you're almost by omission excluding it. Well, you said this, but not that, right? So, I mean, that to me, that's why maybe you don't want to be too specific.
Yeah, I'm afraid if people look at it like the interpretation we got was, you don't want this, which was not at all what we said. We said the decision is the appointer's prerogative.
So that was the end of Megan Sullivan's comments. So why don't we come back to the director of facilities and the other things, but why don't we go to Chris's email comments, and then after we review those, we can, if it makes sense, take Chris's comment live in the chat. So the comments were, should the warrant committee member be non-voting, as was the case with the last school building committee? It would make sense to keep that member's status consistent with the established advisory role of the warrant committee overall, especially since the warrant committee will ultimately be casting a vote to approve or dismiss the process. Appointment process via town moderator would remain the same.
I think they should be a voting member. It's my 2 cents, but
So I guess if they weren't a voting member, would that mean they should be down in the other section? That's one thought I have.
That's what it would mean.
And I think the comment, oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, yeah, I'm not sure I follow the logic that they also have a vote on the warrant committee. I mean, that is true, but no matter what they feel about the project, I'm not sure that's going to affect their vote on the warrant committee one way or the other. They're going to vote whether they like it or not. And so I think the member of the warrant committee should have a vote.
I was going to say, I think the warrant committee is a large group of people that acts by majority vote. So however this one person feels may or may not reflect the view of the warrant committee ultimately. And even at the end of the day, on any town meeting action, the warrant committee is just like the planning board makes a recommendation on a zoning article. It's a recommendation on a warrant, on a budget. It's not binding in any way. So I didn't see the rationale in excluding that person from being a voting member. For me, voting versus non-voting was town resident versus employee.
Yes.
And even if the employee was also a town resident, I don't want them to vote because I think they have a conflict with the fact that they're an employee. The warrant committee member to me doesn't meet that test.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sarah, on that. The other thing is, if I was sitting there and I had a warrant committee member there, I mean, I'm sure they're expressing their opinion, but a vote also tells you something, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's important as you're moving along in a project, right? I would hate for them to be sitting there and not voting, and then they go and vote against it at the warrant committee. I don't know. It's a little bit more knowledge while you're there for the group, right? That
Does anyone think they should be excluded?
No,
Cynthia?
No,
All right, so we want to just move on to the next one, the next point.
Yeah. So the second point was if the committee agrees to have the person non-voting, then I'm going to skip that comment. Although the comment was generally, do we have the right number of voting versus non-voting? And I think we felt pretty comfortable with that last week. If anyone wants to revisit that, jump up right now. Point 3 was suggestion to add language that said the select board has the discretion to add one additional voting member if needed to meet the grant qualifications or other circumstances dictate the need for specialized expertise. Her point was you never know if the MSBA requirements requires something, or the unique nature of a school project like a historic building where you might not have covered all your bases. She said Tisbury ended up adding someone from its historic commission for that very reason. So it would put in the select board the obligation to provide that extra person if the circumstances necessitated it. I think just my comments on it, as I thought about this before, was I think it, Bob, I hear you starting to think in your head, there's no reason that the select board can't have one of its people meet those criteria already. So if it's a historic building that we're renovating, they should pick someone who has historic experience without us giving more people to the committee.
I
I
th-
couldn't have said it better myself.
And I agree with that, except could there be the case where you would be far in the process and then, because it takes so much time to work with the state, they say, oh, we would have improved it, but now you need this, right? I think you might not know that you need somebody, but I don't understand why couldn't you just say, oh, they say we need this, and then you could hire them as a consultant to the group or as a non-voting member or something? Could you, what precludes anybody from doing that?
Well, so I think procedurally 2 points on Carolyn's. One is the way we drafted it. We say there have to be at least 3 non-voting members. And I think that was partly geared toward, we didn't know whether there'd be 1 or 2 principals at play. That theoretically means you could have a larger number of ex officio people, although it leaves open the gap of who would appoint those people, the way we have it drafted. But I do think you could hire them as consultants without having them be a voting member. And I don't read the MSBA requirements to say that they are going to not approve it because you didn't have someone as a voting member on your committee. So maybe we could address this point and that fear by having, some language that says to the extent necessary to satisfy, MSBA requirements, the select board will be the one who appoints an additional ex officio member.
Yeah, I would like that. And then you've covered it, and then you know where they go in terms of their non-voting. Because it might even, I'm just kind of grasping here, but it could be someone maybe not even in the town, just depending on what the particular expertise is. Most likely there's somebody in town, but.
So not to noodle, but well, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sarah, finish what you're typing.
So does anybody cover? I was just wondering if we may say including without limitation and then reference the MSBA requirements.
And would this be, I would think this would be based on a change in the MSBA requirements after the committee is appointed, right? Because if the selectmen know what the requirements are and they make their appointments, then it's covered. I think this only comes up if there's a change in circumstances.
What if you changed it to as may become required?
Yeah, as may become would be great. That's good.
I guess I think
Order language.
yeah.
I
That's
was
fine.
also wondering whether under the select board, we would want to say something about the people that they are appointing. They should be considering the special circumstances of the building. And I'm just thinking about the historical, if there's any way of putting it in there as well. So if it's known up front, we don't need to have any additional member.
Yeah.
So something like the select board shall appoint 4 voting members, taking into account the particulars of the proposed school project at issue.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that means on. Wouldn't they do that anyways?
Maybe.
I wonder whether we want to have a such as to make it clearer,
Such as what though?
such as the historical building.
I think if you, well, debate, but I mean, I think if you keep adding in, historical, then what about the seniors? And what about, I think we sort of have to trust our selectmen to represent, to pick people that represent the concerns being presented.
I don't feel super strongly about this. I mean, if anything, it's going to be suggestive and not required. So I don't know how much it's worth.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Well, let's come back to that, but go back to Chris's comments. So the third point was her point, if something necessitates the addition of people, the select board would appoint them. So I think we have covered that. Point 4, is it worth including in the bylaw simple sentence regarding subcommittee appointments? Sample sentence, the SBC may create subcommittees and appoint members to those subcommittees as needed. Any non-voting SBC members would have consistent non-voting status on the subcommittee. And she said there was some confusion last time regarding one SBC subcommittee member who was non-voting on the SBC, but voting on the subcommittee. When the subcommittee appointments were made, member voting statuses were simply overlooked. So it may help to have some clarity.
Do we have any knowledge of what the subcommittees were the last time? Because I'm sort of struggling with what this means.
Yeah, I didn't know that there were subcommittees, but I didn't follow it that closely, but she implies that there were.
Yeah.
Why don't you cover it up? We have voting requirements, say that, the vote of any member of the committee or any subcommittee established thereunder must meet these qualifications.
Or your voting ability follows you into any subcommittee.
Yeah, all voting members of the SBC or any subcommittee created thereunder shall be.
Yeah, maybe we could ask Chris when she steps in, if we could ask her what she really meant by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, she said, well, we should invite her because we want to get her comment on the
Yeah.
residents at large moderator, but she did comment in the chat, sustainability and communications were the
Yeah.
2 subcommittees. So I think I took for granted that anyone would think you could gain voting status in a subcommittee, but I'm not opposed to adding some language that makes it clear that your voting status is the same, whether you're talking about votes of the overall committee or subs. But I don't think we need to reference the names of the subcommittees because we don't know what subcommittees they're going to create.
Yeah, we just could never, and then it's getting way too detailed for what we're trying to do, right? They have to look at their project and decide.
Right.
Yeah, I think that wording covers it.
Yeah, I think so too. Do we want to promote Chris to share her comments on the moderator residents at large?
Sure.
Yeah, I can do that now if you want.
That would be great.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, you should be good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think it was just, I was so happy in the previous discussion to hear, and just echoing what Russ said, just the residents at large being just general residents at large and not being so specific, with even suggesting building, engineering, commercial, or construction background. I think having just residents at large is really important. I mean, you also have to remember too, with the school building project, you're going to be hiring a project manager, and you're going to be hiring an architect. And I don't know how many more people you need to have on the committee beyond the ones appointed by the select board to help be a good, just sort of general sounding board as to what is being presented, with the knowledge to be able to ask informed questions. And I just would hate to lose the 2 positions of residents at large.
Chris, while you're here, did you want to clarify any of our discussion about your written comments, or do you think we adequately summarized what your comment was?
Yeah, no, you adequately summarized. Also, just a quick point. I didn't have a strong feeling about whether the warrant committee member should be voting or non-voting or non-voting. I just didn't understand the rationale why the warrant committee member was non-voting on the last SBC. So I was trying to kind of guess as to why that was the case. I didn't really understand it, but I don't have a strong feeling either way. And I think what you guys have put in here is great.
And how about your comment about subcommittees? What kind of subcommittees happened in the past that you foresee in the future?
Well, I don't, again, to you guys, to your point, I don't think there needs to be anything to name specific subcommittees. It's just a matter of providing the clarity that if this main committee does decide to form subcommittees, and you guys put it in there that just if they're non-voting members of the regular committee or they're voting members, it just, I think the SBC just needs to clarify, does that status carry over into the subcommittee if those subcommittees are created? And I think you guys did that with your comments.
I would also just say that I think it's a little weird if there are subcommittees that are often needed to delve into something, but I don't know why they're voting. I mean, their job is to delve in, figure it out, and come back to the big committee and explain it. And that's where the vote should be taken. So I
Great.
I can see if the subcommittees were so contentious that they couldn't reach consensus on what they were bringing back.
Well,
really?
some of it, the voting in the subcommittee, because I said I didn't do the sustainability ones, but I did the communications ones. They were mostly procedural, taking minutes, and oftentimes they would agree on messaging that was going to go out, or recommendations. They would vote on recommendations. So it didn't seem unusual to me that they were voting, but it was all procedural votes.
My experience with subcommittees is that a subcommittee works on something and then actually does a vote on what it's suggesting to the full organization.
Exactly.
So there would be voting there for, coming up with the so-called consensus, but as a vote. So
doesn't the big committee then look at that work and take a vote?
Well, I think the purpose generally of a subcommittee is to come up with a result and suggest it to the committee. Yes, the full committee can do what it wants.
Right.
At least that's the purpose. Now, I suppose you could have a subcommittee that just does some homework and then just kind of reports stuff to the board. I don't know what else a subcommittee would do.
So can I ask, I think it's an absolutely legitimate concern to be raised, and I think we cover it, right? If we're just clear that whether you're on a committee or a subcommittee, you don't have a vote unless you meet the criteria.
Okay. Yeah, we've clarified. I guess we can just, yeah.
That's perfect. In my view, that's perfect. That's exactly what my intention was, just to have that one clarifying sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's talk about the residents at large,
Yeah.
right? That Chris had just brought up, and we've talked about it before. And I just put in there pertinent because when I was writing it, I went, are we just residents at large, or are we trying to suggest that they also? But I'm totally comfortable with the idea they're residents at large, who have a good town perspective, right?
I agree with that.
Me too.
As do I.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we can just go back and put the period there right after residents at large.
I think that I'm in agreement with that as well. I think that was where we were headed in our minds at the last meeting. The only reason we just talked about whether we should add the experience was to address whether the select board, how that should be framed. So do you want to go back to that point? We don't have any other attendees who've put their name in the Q&A.
Okay,
So Shu, I don't know if we need to do this or not, but procedurally, just so no one feels treated unfairly. So we will close the public comment period of this meeting.
Did we say in the minutes that we would do it for 1 hour? Like, should we keep it open for literally one more
I
minute?
thought we said 45 minutes.
Did we? Okay,
Nope.
let me go back.
Yeah,
I
so
haven't-
I would bring a motion to close the public comment session. I don't know if we need to
Second.
do that or not. Okay, Carolyn, do you vote to approve?
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
And I vote yes, thank you. I don't know if we need to do that, but just to be safe. Okay,
Okay.
Okay, so you can also see my screen, right?
Yes.
What I was thinking we could do is start at the top and go through the highlighted items. As we scroll down, if you see something that you want to revise, like just shout it out. But otherwise, let's go through the highlighted yellow and
Sure.
then.
I can explain that first one. What, can you just scroll back for a minute? Because we had the words whose terms do not expire at the same time. And as I was writing it, I thought, is it an easier way to say that? Or who will not be up for election in the same year? And it just came to me as other wording, and either one works. That's why that's highlighted.
Can I also ask, before we move on, actually, a procedural question? So in terms of like how we best reach agreement on a draft and timing being an issue here. I know I didn't send it till, shortly before the meeting, and Carolyn as well. So people probably haven't had a chance to really digest it. We're making edits now that people can see on the screen, but can't really digest. We can't communicate offline. Although I don't know if people can send edits to Brittany and she can send them around. I'm not sure. I guess I'm just wondering how we should tackle editing this.
that's a great question. I mean, I think at some point we're going to have either a section by section vote, which is probably what we should do, in my view. But it seems like we're getting to consensus, if not unanimity, on most of these points as we're walking through. So one suggestion will be just to continue walking through like you were, and that should flush out disputes. And then maybe at the end we can figure out, maybe the next meeting is really to vote on all these pieces. Give everyone a chance to think about it. Give Tom Marie a chance to come back into the loop.
Well, and we, I think we have a deadline coming up, and then we've got however many hours notice of a next meeting. So we need to decide when we'll meet again relative to that as well. But yeah, so I think let's continue on with making sure we're in agreement on what we think it is. But as we're going through, what I tried to do when I sent it around was also send a red line against the permanent building committee language, figuring if I directly lifted it, unless there was some reason to change it, that people would probably be okay with it.
Sarah, can I ask a couple of noodling questions?
Yeah.
And I will not have a lot of the group's time in this, but the introductory paragraph of all school buildings owned by the town. I mean, doesn't the town own all of the school buildings? So can we just say all of the school buildings, period?
Yeah. That was referenced, that was pulling back. I have the permanent building here. So the permanent building committee's language is all buildings owned by the town, constructed on land owned, leased, and operated by the town. The school department was Chris's suggested edit. I should have had that in green.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the school department owns anything, right? I mean, I think the town of
Well,
Medfield
just to be
owns
clear,
all this.
like we have no jurisdiction over Montrose. So should we say all?
But we don't
But the
fund
ta-
it, right?
But the town doesn't. Did they rent?
We
or
can't
own?
just say all school buildings because there's private schools. So we have to say either all school buildings owned by the town or all school buildings located on town property.
How about
think
all
it's-
school buildings operated by the town?
Well, I think owns fine, but it's not the school department that owns the buildings, it's the town. So
Right.
So that was a
Take
clarification.
that out.
that needs to come out. So it would be the alteration or enlargement of all school buildings owned by the town. And that just clarifies the ones, like Montrose or a preschool or something that we don't.
And then the constructed on land loaned, leased, and operated by the town, we take the school department out. That language is in the permanent building committee bylaw.
Okay.
And indulge a lawyer for a second, then I'll shut up, but can we make all school buildings any school building? I don't know why.
Alteration of, and yep. The the permanent building has all. I don't disagree with you that I think it should be any.
If you two lawyers think any, you go for it. 'cause-
Hey, this
We're
is
gonna-
how we
we're gonna
spend
fix-
half of our day debating any or all.
We're gonna get this right this time. I don't care who drafted it last time. So the question is owned by the town, constructed on land owned. Do you want to take the constructed on? If it's owned by the town, even if it was on private property, it would be subject to this.
Yeah, I don't really get that, why we have to talk about the land, because it's, if the town owns the building, we're in charge of renovating, or whatever the case may be.
Well, we also are dealing with a new building situation on land.
On new land.
So
Oh, right.
But if the building's owned by the town, doesn't that cover everything? Like, I mean, you wouldn't have a school that Medfield's running that's not in a building owned.
What
by
if
the
you say,
town.
or to be constructed on, hold on, to be constructed on land owned, leased, or operated by the town?
I'm sorry, I just don't get why you have to put it in. Why can't you just say it's any school building? This is what it's about.
Yeah,
Any
agreed.
school
Well, the
buildings
thing,
owned
Russ-
by the town.
Russ
I don't
is-
get Russ's point there, Russ.
Russ's point is if it doesn't exist yet, it's not a school building yet. If you were building on,
Oh.
But it would be,
oh.
but it would be the planning,
How about
design,
any
approve,
or
and
future
construction of any
school
school
buildings?
building. So I think it's covered by the preamble, right?
okay,
what about
Any-
owned
any
or
or
to be
future?
owned by the town? Owned by,
But it-
owned,
But isn't that covered? Because we're talking about, design, planning, approval, construction. So yeah, that's fine. Or to be owned by the town. It doesn't.
probably doesn't matter.
okay.
Okay.
Take out
moving
the
on.
land, yeah.
Composition, I just noticed this should be ones, not a, so I'll fix that. Actually, maybe I can just make this a one, but, anyways, I'll fix that. Okay, consist of 12 voting members, at least 3 non-voting members. Voting members, all vote, this is all Carolyn's language, just reformatted. All voting members of the SBC or any subcommittee established thereunder shall be Medfield residents and shall not be employees of the town of Medfield. The voting members shall be appointed as follows. No, I'm going to keep going unless there's an objection. The school committee shall appoint 4 voting members to the SBC. 2 appointments will be current school committee members whose terms do not expire at the same time or who will not be up for election in the same year. And then I'll come back to that language. 2 additional appointments will be Medfield residents with pertinent educational experience, if possible. Should we say with, instead of pertinent educational, should we say with experience? I don't know what pertinent educational experience means. Should it be
Well,
with
if you were,
experience?
like, if you were making a preschool, you might want someone on it who has knowledge of preschools and
Yeah,
what
I
they,
think the problem I'm struggling with is educational, because educational could be like my education, which was not in education. So pertinent experience in education.
sure.
Okay. And then going back to your point before, Carolyn, is what's the best way to say you don't want both school committee members to have to be replaced at the same time?
Right.
I think who will be up for election in the same year.
Or whose terms are not coterminous.
You could say whose terms are not concurrent, I guess.
Concurrent, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well, they are concurrent, but they're not. I think you were right with coterminous, because you can be
Coterminous, yeah.
concurrent but end at different times.
You're right. Yeah, so coterminous.
Right, they're there, but they, yeah.
Ah, I was right the first time. These terms are not coterminous. Okay. All right. The town moderator shall appoint 4 voting members to the SBC. 1 appointment will be a current Warren committee member. The warrant committee will select its member. What about instead of, well, current warrant committee? What if we say the current warrant committee member selected by the warrant committee? Should we say selected by a majority vote of the warrant committee?
Trying to remember how they do things. Do we need?
I
to-
think the
mean,
warrant committee should decide how they do
Yeah.
that. I'm not sure that we should decide.
Okay.
that.
So it'll be a current warrant committee member selected by the warrant committee.
Yes. that
One
makes it-
appointment will be a Medfield resident over 55 years of age. 2 appointments will be residents at large.
Yes.
Is that a little bit redundant? Like, I mean, is the 55 and over a resident at large? Sort of that was the whole idea of that person, but just representing a certain demographic of the community.
Well,
you
the
have
55
three-
and older was for the elderly population, and then the other 2 are just random.
Okay, that's fine. I don't feel, I'm just asking. I don't feel strongly about it.
Okay.
So, Sarah, as we're agreeing, I know I see you're putting lines through stuff. Are you leaving that to show people the change, or do you just want to delete it now so we have sort of a clean?
I was leaving it to show you all what I was doing, and then I was going to save a clean and a red line and send them out at the end.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. The select board shall appoint 4 voting members to the SBC. 1 appointment will be a planning board member. The planning board will select the member who shall represent the interests of the town-wide master plan. Maybe we should say who shall, I'm trying to say something like, among other things, represent. It's not just the interests of the town-wide master plan, but that's one of the things that they should represent. Right.
And you want to take the same format then? It should be
Right.
appointed planning board selected by the planning board, representing planning board, whatever, as well as including the townwide master plan or something like that.
Your planning board member. I mean, is it safe to assume that any member of the planning board is going to be knowledgeable of the townwide master plan?
I think, hold on.
And if so, do we need to say that? But I don't know if that's true.
I think that when we talked about it last, we wanted to specifically reference the townwide master plan. So what if we
Okay.
said, the select board shall appoint for 1 appointment will be a planning board member selected by the planning board to represent the planning board's interests, including without limitation, the interests of the townwide master plan.
That sounds good.
So now we're back to this question we paused on before. 2 appointments will be residents with expertise in pertinent areas such as architecture, building engineering, commercial or municipal construction, and/or construction law/contracts. And at least 1 shall have experience in green energy sustainability measures, including knowledge of Medfield's energy goals to meet net zero.
I would just change, I don't think we need green energy because people are going to come back and say, what does that mean? So I think you can just say energy.
And I'm not comfortable with the way it's worded about 2 and then at least 1 more kind of thing. Either you say, 2 appointments with those qualities and 1, and 1 with energy. But I'm thinking that additional 1 might have, some of the other qualities and energy.
So couldn't the energy just be one of the qualifications along with the others?
I guess only if you're going to mandate that everything that's listed has to be included in your appointments.
I think that's the issue, is whether we want to mandate the energy.
Yeah,
I think we do.
yeah.
I don't think it's going to be, I think the way, I'm throwing this out for thought, I haven't thought this point through fully. If we say 2 shall have engineering, architecture, construction, and 1 shall have expertise in energy, theoretically, you could still only have two members. One could have building and energy, and the other could have construction. And then the third could be total no experience. Which I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's a bad thing. I think that the way we drafted it, that could happen.
Wait, how could that happen when we say two will be residents with expertise? How do they get around having someone
Well,
without?
so let's say me and Cynthia are chosen. I have experience in commercial construction, and Cynthia is an engineer and also has energy experience. The two of us have met those requirements. Two people with,
Oh,
our-
you think they wouldn't bother with the other one then?
no, they'd have a third, but they'd be free to choose the third to be whoever they want.
How about this? How about we say 3 are appointed with all those qualifications, and in additional, at least one has to also include energy.
So
You have to
3
say
are
one of
appointed,
the
one of
three.
which.
Yeah, one of which, you have to say one of the three.
At least one of them
Yes.
Shall also
Having-
have expertise
in energy.
also.
So I don't know that we want to tell the selectmen you have to pick one that's focused on energy, but rather among your selections, you should have one that has knowledge of energy.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
So are we in agreement? 3 shall have the experience and one of which shall also have experience?
No, one of which, with.
One
no.
of the three.
And at least one of which shall have. Yeah,
Okay.
Wait, should it be at least one of the appointees shall have instead of which?
well, of
I'm
which,
talking about one of the 3.
yeah, one of which refers to the 3 appointees.
Right.
Okay,
That works.
I assume no one has any objection to the select board not selecting one of themselves to serve.
I think that's wise.
That's fine.
Right.
Is current serving member of the select board clear that,
I think so.
I figured maybe someone who was no longer on it might have some expertise and they could be appointed if they weren't.
yeah, a
currently
former
serving.
select board person? That's a
Yeah.
good point. We're not
Can you
trying to
just-
bar that person.
Can
Right.
you just take out serving? No current member of the select board? You're either on the board or you're not.
Yeah. I think that's fine. Okay. Non-voting members, the following individuals be ex officio. I added comma non-voting, Carolyn, just to be
Yep.
clear in case anyone wasn't sure what ex officio meant. Of the SBC, the superintendent of schools and or his or her appointed designee, the building principals directly affected by the school project, the town administrator and or his or her appointed designee. The town administrator shall consult with the town director of facilities. This is where we kind of said we would revisit whether we need to reference the consultation with the director of facilities. What if we said the town administrator in consultation with the town director of facilities?
Or could you say in consultation with the appropriate town departments? I mean, there might be others that we're
Yeah.
not thinking of. that would have input.
Yeah, that makes it broader, so, yeah.
Yeah, they may need highway in.
We put it on the town administrator to gather the feedback of the other than school.
Right.
Okay. Do we still need to confirm if built schools are under the jurisdiction of the director of facilities?
Yeah.
No, I don't
think
think so, because the way you worded it, that's,
Right.
they could figure that out. Yeah.
Okay, then we have this clause that was from the comment that Chris raised, such additional members as may become required by the applicable requirements of that school project, including without limitation, I said, should we reference the MSBA requirements to be appointed by the select board?
My concern would be if you don't make it clear that, look, once the select board has picked their appointees, that's it. The only way you can bring someone else in is if the rules change, right? You made your appointments because the rules required X and now they require Y.
Right, so
Yes,
if
I
you say
think-
something like if the MSBA requirements change during the process, the select board will have the option to add,
Mhm.
something like that.
So as may become required by the state.
Yeah, maybe we say, we just reference the, as may be required by Mass General Law, whatever the MSBA regulatory reference is.
And are we leaving that to their discretion? I mean, I know some people have voiced concerns about, do we want to be tied to the MSBA? And what if there was, and I don't know enough about it here again, but what if there was a conscious choice to say, we'd rather not get that money and do it a different way?
I
Well,
think,
I was thinking that this would be a fail-safe if we decided we wanted to pursue that and we needed something to get that money, not that we have to pursue that
right,
money.
yeah, it doesn't say you have to go through that process. It's a, if you do, right, then
Right.
Okay.
you're ready
Okay,
for it.
good point. Yeah, good point.
How about, what if we say something like as may become required in order to obtain funding under whatever the MSBA?
And then you wouldn't have to even reference, just under the MSBA statute.
Right.
And do we want to limit it? We want to say, well, I guess you can't, right? 'Cause you don't know what they'd need.
Yeah.
I
what
think
if it turns out we
it'll be
need
a
two
rare
or-
thing that you will have to add someone, because we've already put in the people we know they have set up, the superintendent and principal. So I think it's rare, but it may happen.
And their statute is also just says may. So chances are they're not going to change it to be required.
Yeah.
But so after saying we should trust our elected officials, here's a question. I mean, does this open the door for, things start getting nasty? Oh, they're non-voting members, I guess, but still now the select board want to add in a few other people to the mix.
What if we had something like if and to the extent required, like they can't appoint 7 people if the requirement is that they add 1 to get state funding?
Okay.
Great. Moving on. So this was something that this paragraph D was something I inserted about the reappointment. I think we talked about it in concept, but I said, actually, my paragraph reference is wrong now. Except as provided in the next paragraph, the term of each member's appointment shall expire upon the completion or earlier termination of the applicable school project. So everyone's on for the project in question.
Yes.
Then the next paragraph, I said, if their term as an elected official expires, their employment by the town of Medfield terminates, or they choose to resign, the appointing authority who initially selected such member will be responsible for selecting a member for the balance of the school project.
I think that makes sense.
And I put employment because technically, well, the only thing is with the employees, they weren't appointed by anybody. So maybe that doesn't perfectly
Yeah.
tie out.
If their employment, so I would think like if it's a town administrator and you had a new town administrator, that person would just come.
Yeah, so maybe we don't need to deal
But-
with the employment.
Yeah, I think it's just if the elected official, right,
Or if they resign.
if they resign or their term ends, then yes, you have to, right, has to be appointed.
Is resign, it's not resign, yeah, resign.
Well,
Like, I don't
but
know if you resign your term, resign from their appointment.
But if a town employee resigns, wait a second, what was I going to say?
Well, I think if the town employee resigns, whoever replaces them in that role will automatically become the new ex officio member. So if the principal quits, the new principal becomes the new member.
Right, exactly.
So I don't think we need to deal with the appointing authority appointing a replacement in the case of employees.
No, because they're actually not appointed. We've chosen them.
Right.
So it's just whoever's in that role, right?
Well, the town administrator is not elected.
Oh, good point. So,
Correct.
but
So you need to talk about employees.
no, because the new town administrator will take on the role.
The role, it's just it's part of their job. Whoever the town administrator is, their job is to be on the school building committee, if there's one.
Well, no, you're saying if an elected official expires, it has to be reappointed by such appointing body. Same applies to an employee.
No, because I didn't name a person. So I just said the superintendent of schools, whoever it may then be. So right now it's Marsden, and then it could be Lemke. Whoever is then the superintendent. I'm not going to try to be superintendent.
Do you have like some secret plan here?
Yes, my dad was the
Can we talk more
superintendent.
about that, Sarah?
Yes, my dad was the superintendent in Needham forever,
Oh,
but
really?
I'm definitely not following those footsteps.
What was your maiden name? If I could ask.
Fial.
I grew up in
Steve
Needham.
Fial,
so
was my
yes.
dad.
Well, what elected official is on the school board building committee?
There are no.
Warrant committee.
The
Two
warrant
school,
committee.
yeah, the warrant.
But they're not
committee-
elected though.
Double
They're
committee.
No,
appointed.
the warrant committee is appointed by the moderator.
The planning board, the school committee, and the warrant committee.
Oh,
No,
right,
sorry, planning board and
right.
the school committee.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So how is that different than the elected official? I mean, if it happens, the appointing body has to appoint somebody new to replace them. What's the difference between elected or just an employee?
I
Well, an
don't know.
employee to me would be the town administrator, and elected would be the superintendent of schools, for example.
I think what it clarifies is if, say, a school committee member doesn't run, instead of having the select board appoint that school committee member to be in the school building, we've clarified that wherever the person left from, that's where they get appointed from.
Oh, no, I understand that. I don't understand the distinction in paragraph E, distinction of elected official versus just a town employee. Anybody on the school building committee who's, you
So I
know,
think to
No,
say,
wouldn't
Russ's
that be the-
example, if I was the planning board representative and my term expired without running or reelection, then the planning board would recommend their new designee. You're saying it would just happen naturally without needing to specify it in here.
right, right. And, oh, so you're saying that the only employees we have is the town administrator,
No,
And
The
The
principal and the
and the
superintendent.
Oh, yeah. And if they leave, they automatically, the new person automatically steps into that role
Right,
as ex officio.
I
yes.
think the
Yes.
difference is that with the planning board and the warrant committee and the school committee, there's more than one person serving that role. So it has to be like chosen. The town administrator gets replaced by a new town administrator. There's no question about who will serve because it will be the person who's then sitting as the town administrator. With the planning board, you're going to have to go back to the planning board and say, pick a new representative.
So again, the town administrator, so the elected officials, oh, there's a planning board who's elected. Yeah, okay.
and school committee.
I'm confusing myself here. I'll let it go.
I think I confuse things by adding the employee, and I think we all agree that we don't need to address a termination of an employee because the new person in that role will automatically
Yeah.
take on the
Yes.
role. The biggest point
Great.
here is if one of the residents at large decides they don't want to do it anymore or moves out of town,
All
Then
right,
the moderator is the one who picks
Yeah.
the replacement.
Yes.
Yes.
right, right.
Okay.
Okay.
Going on to the procedural requirements. So a minimum of 7 members of the SBC shall be present at any meeting to constitute a quorum. All actions of the SBC shall require a vote of agreement by a minimum of 2/3 of the membership of the SBC. Is that clear that it's not the then present, it's the full committee?
Can
Yes.
you just go back? What is the total number now that we have?
We have 12 voting and
12 voting.
3 plus non-voting.
Okay.
So, should it say of the voting membership of the
Right.
SBC?
Yes.
Yes.
Should we say the voting members?
But do you need that in A too? So you need 7 members of the, for the
Yes.
vote. Yeah.
Yeah, minimum of 7 members. A minimum
Of
of
7 voting members.
Yep.
Yes.
I agree. Okay, all meetings shall be subject to the.
Can I
open
just ask
meeting law.
another question? 2/3 would then be 8. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Should we say that?
I think we should say that just so people are very clear.
Now, that means that if we have a minimum of 7 to get a quorum, we still need 8 for a vote.
Right.
So the vote could not happen that night.
Exactly. They can meet.
Well, we're trying
talk,
to
and
have votes
stuff.
happen when everyone's present.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that is healthy.
Thank you.
When I say, I don't want to say affirmatively like that it has to be a yes vote. I'm just saying they have to reach agreement.
Yes.
Could you just say 2/3 / 8 of 12? Put it in the first parenthetical. I mean, I think 2/3 is clear, but you're gonna belt and suspenders and maybe do it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it
You
just,
could maybe just take out the 2/3. I know that you usually put the number in when you write the word, but in this case, just write the word 2/3 and then put 8
Yeah.
of 12
Yeah.
in
that
parentheses.
makes sense.
Yep.
And
Now-
that's nice because then there's the contrast between A and B kind of pointing out that we want votes to happen when everyone's there.
Mhm.
And I suggest maybe we say the minimum shall be 8 to have a quorum.
Well, they might have meetings where they don't need to vote on anything.
And they could get a lot of work done without voting. Then when they have 8, they can vote on the work they did, but you
Okay,
know,
okay.
All right, all meetings shall be subject to the open meeting law. I'm gonna add the statutory reference. Shall be recorded and minutes shall be taken. The town of Medfield shall provide a clerk to take the minutes of all meetings, ensure the meeting is recorded, and maintain the record of recordings and minutes for all meetings for the duration of the school project.
Good.
Any objections? All right.
no, can I
third-
just
okay.
clarify? That means subcommittee meetings will also have the clerk?
That sounds like a
As
big
written,
burden
yeah.
to have it at subcommittee meetings too.
Okay, so are they under open meeting law though?
Yes, they should.
Well, I
be.
guess if they're under open meeting, then we should follow all the same procedural niceties.
Yeah.
So should we say all meetings? Well, we just say all meetings, all meetings.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a quorum present, it's a technical meeting.
Okay, but like a subcommittee could have like 3 people. I just want to be clear. So a subcommittee is 3 people. They should follow the open meeting law, right? But
Do we need to say that though? I mean, either they do or they don't, right?
Do you
I
have to
mean,
follow the open meeting law if you don't have a quorum? That's a question I don't know the answer to.
I don't know, but I'm not sure. Do we need to answer it? Is that our role? I mean, they either are or they aren't, right? And
Right. If they're not subject to the open meeting laws, I'm not sure that all of this recording and minutes are
yeah,
required.
so yes, so if you're elected and it's like a school committee has 5, 2 people, if they're on the school committee, they're not supposed to talk unless it's a meeting.
But
right.
this is not elected. This is a appointed. Is there a difference?
Appointed. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So I just, like, we're giving a clerk to the big committee, and I think we absolutely should do that. I just wonder if someone would say, gee, does my subcommittee get a clerk, and should they take minutes? Like, that's,
It's a good point. I think they should take minutes, and I don't think the town should have to provide a clerk. I think it should be optional, because you don't know how many little committees are going to get broken off.
so we should maybe put one sentence that say subcommittees will follow the open meeting law and take their
Well, I
own.
think we can say that they're all subject to the open meeting law, recorded, and shall have minutes taken. And then the town shall provide a clerk to take the minutes of all full SBC.
Yeah, I think just clarify that, because, you know, I don't, yeah, and I think the small ones can take their own minutes. I just want to be clear about that, right?
Could you do it at the outset, you know, with the exclusion of any subcommittee meetings, comma, the town shall provide a clerk to take minutes? I think that doesn't.
What about that? So all meetings are subject to the open meeting law. Shall be maybe we take out the recorded for the subcommittee. We're not going to require subcommittee meetings be recorded. To take the minutes of all meetings and ensure the meeting is recorded. So we record the full committee meetings and don't record the sub.
I think that's,
Yes.
that's good.
Yeah.
All right, jurisdiction, initiating a project. This SBC shall have, so this A was taken from the Permanent Building Committee. I have no idea what the right statutory reference is, but I think what we want to get at is that they have supervisory authority and oversight of all projects that fall under whatever the statute is for school building projects, including without limitation, the MSBA projects.
So Sarah, can you type exactly what you just said in there? And then I think we can charge Brittany with going back to town council and getting the appropriate references.
Yep. So we're going to say this for all projects that fall under insert statutory reference to all
School building projects, yeah.
okay.
Before we get too deep into the language here, as we're going on this section C, the whole thing, I was confused in the general format of everything, in the proper order of sequences of these kind of paragraphs. And one of my confusions was different ones talking about different feasibility studies and where are we going to get funding from for each. And it was sort of out of order a little bit for me in general. I was visualizing the A and B paragraphs to kind of be in and to themselves as a C jurisdictional type thing. And then the rest of them, C, D, E, F, and G, were more towards, the operational. And then I was confused about when feasibility money comes in and who gives it, town meeting, selectmen. So my first suggestion is, can we agree that, like you just did, C should be the A and B paragraphs, and then we go to the rest of them later?
I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
Can you say, Russ, I'm not sure I'm following. Can you say that again?
Simply what Sarah did was separate A and B by
Separate
themselves.
jurisdiction and process.
Yeah, and C would be the jurisdictional ones that are all by themselves. And then D would be how things happen.
If we're gonna do that, should we flip it? I mean, to me, it would be more logical. How do you get this committee going? Question
Well,
one.
I
And
think
then
the
once they're going,
jurisdiction could go in the very beginning too.
Okay, you're right. You're right. I'm just thinking the B is more kind of what they do once they're appointed.
Yeah.
B,
I was very
Right.
confused when I was drafting it, as you can see, as it came out, because I have no idea what happens after
Yeah.
we form this committee. And I was trying to draft.
Well,
That's why I'm wondering, and maybe this is a point for another meeting, but like, I mean, I think the permanent building committee bylaw that we're modifying kind of has a process. And what we're, in my view, doing is having a carve out for school buildings. So
Yeah,
once you-
although I cut and pasted a lot of that language. I added some things about the actual formation of the committee at the beginning, which we had talked about. But then I did copy their language about like doing a feasibility study. That was really the only thing that the permanent building committee addressed.
yeah,
I think we decided to only, to create a new one for the school building committee, let planning board, permanent building committee stand with the one edit, simply removing jurisdiction over school buildings.
so we could is there a way to, as we talk about how our people get appointed on the school building, but then once you get to the process, it has to follow the same process as you would for any building in town. You got to do the feasibility study, you got to appropriate the funds, then you got to appropriate the funds for the architect, and then you got to
Right.
approve the plan. It's that part is all the same as any other building.
And it
Correct.
can be copied.
Or is there a way to defer back to the existing statute, which might be more confusing? But I mean, I think to the extent we don't have to reinvent the wheel here.
Well, we don't want to be inconsistent with whatever is required by,
Right. Right, that
procurement,
is a problem.
whatever.
I just think this is a whole nother, I mean, we could spend another 3 weeks about how they process this, right? And I'm not sure any of us know enough about what that looks like to do it.
Well, maybe we stop it at the committee is formed. And then whatever the committee does is not the subject of this bylaw because it's subject to some other framework.
So could we insert in the original permanent building thing, right? We take out the school and then say, please see whatever section it is below for the formation of a school building committee. And then we have our piece, and then you go back to the section is carried out.
I think that works. Then go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
The only thing, if you look at the permanent building committee bylaw, I don't think this works as like a subset of that. The way I was thinking about it is this would be a totally separate thing. But it says like paragraph L and M is if you're wanting to do this project, you file an application with the Board of Selectmen, which I copied over. If the selectmen agree that it should proceed, they refer it to the committee. So for the school committee does an application with the select board. The select board refers it to the committee. Then it says the committee shall meet with the applicant department, which in this case would be the school committee.
Right.
If it's deemed viable, the committee will present its findings to the select board for approval to start a feasibility study. So that's what L says in the permanent building committee. So the school committee makes some sort of vote to go to the select board. The select board, if they think it makes sense, forms the committee, or they kick the process off to form the committee. Then the committee consults with the school department, the school committee, and goes back to the select board for permission to start a feasibility study, according to paragraph L. Then after the completion of the feasibility study, this is now paragraph M of the permanent building. If it's determined by the select board that the project is necessary, the committee will conduct the final design process subject to town meeting approval of all funding and review of the projected budgets with the select board and the warrant committee. That's what the permanent building committee language would require. So that's what I tried to do here. So let's just go through what I did and then we can change it, but just rationale. A, the school committee makes a vote that they want to initiate a project and they present it to the select board. What they have to present, we can talk about. If the select board agrees that it should proceed, then it convenes the committee. Then by appointing its own members and telling the moderator and the school committee to pick their members.
Right.
Then I put within 30 days, everybody has to do that just to pick some time period. We can make it shorter, longer, whatever. Then within the 30 days of everyone being appointed, it has to have a meeting to kick its process off. And then I put, if the project is deemed viable by them, they go back to the select board for approval to start a feasibility study. That's consistent with paragraph L of the permanent building committee language.
So now my question there is, where does the money come for that feasibility study?
The select board under paragraph L of the permanent building committee tells you whether or not you have it. I don't know where they get it,
That's my question is, where does it come from?
but I don't know. It's the select board's problem. Right?
So that's the first feasibility study, and I don't know what extent that has to be. But maybe that's not my job.
Suggestion, yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds. One is just punt it back, but on the other hand, I mean, if none of us really know what this looks like at the execution phase, should we get some insight on that and a little more information?
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I
Carol.
do. I think we have some questions here that we need, because we can't like put forth something that conflicts with how we do it, or also makes it even harder, right?
But yeah, because I think my take is what we're trying to do is say, what does this committee look like? Who picks the members? What's the expertise? But once that committee is formed, to the extent we can divert back to the normal process, let's do that. And maybe we need, whether it's town council or Christine or whomever, to kind of look at what we're proposing and help us understand, how do we do this right, essentially. The second
Right.
part.
So then I tried to address if the select board, because according to paragraph L, you've got to get permission to do the feasibility study. You've got to get funding at a minimum. Once you get that, you go do your feasibility study, and then you can't go to the next phase until you've gone back to the select board, I think, under paragraph M of the permanent building. If after the completion of a feasibility study, it is deemed by the Board of Selectmen that the proposed project is necessary, the committee can then go on to the final design process. So I tried to deal with that in this paragraph C. Within blank days of the completion of the feasibility study, the SBC can go back to the select board if they want and ask for authorization to continue with the project.
Can I make a suggestion, and then people disagree, please do so? I think it's 8:15. Everyone's a little brain fried at this point. Would it move it forward if we took this and asked Christine to give it to, or Brittany to give it to town council, and just say, focusing on the second part, implementation, is what Sarah's roughed in. Does this work under the rules?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think we're going to resolve it tonight, for sure, in a way
No,
that
I
makes
think it
sense.
makes sense.
Can we talk about one more thing before we move? I agree with you. One more thing before we move on is just as a substantive point. Do people think that, like the idea of the school building committee having a public hearing? All their meetings are open meetings, open to the public. So with that in mind, do we think that that board needs to the committee needs to have a specific public hearing on its feasibility study before it goes back to the select board requesting permission to go to the next stage? That was one of Chris McHugh's edits.
That makes sense to me.
It
Yeah,
does to me.
Yeah, I
that
think
was a
it's very
big
important.
deal to me. And it seemed to me that was one of the major problems
Yep.
the last go around, was this feeling, whether it was true or not, there was a feeling out there that there wasn't enough public input and acknowledgement of the input. So I don't know how much we can legislate into this about that, but it definitely should be part of it.
Agreed.
And sort of hand in hand to that, another comment I was going to have is, can we legislate anything to do with site selection process? Or is it simply, it's up to the committee to deal with whatever issues they think they need to?
I think it's the latter, in my view.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Well, I mean,
I think though that should come before the town.
But the whole proposal, right? I mean, at some point, we're going to say we're looking to build this building in this place, and
yeah, we voted town for several steps in it. We vote money
Yeah.
for the
Right.
various steps. However, the idea that they, do have these public hearings and they get feedback should hopefully make the next group adjust as needed based on the feedback, right? Including site or whatever it is, the size of site,
Right.
and look, if the process that we're proposing in the first part works, then that concern should be addressed, right? So this is a little more just so the public feels they're not in the dark.
I guess that's the purpose of us putting residents on general residents and senior citizen, and
Right.
hopefully, yeah, that was just a question. I would need to review the actual permanent building committee bylaw again a little bit more closely.
Yeah, I tried to follow that
I know you
framework.
did. Yeah, I know
Oh,
you did.
You did an
But
amazing job.
I don't
This is-
understand it enough to know if it makes sense in this context.
Yeah,
And
So-
like, I think we flushed out a couple of questions that I put in here, like, what is the scope of the feasibility study? Who pays for it? I think the public hearing would be after the feasibility study, and I put that you would inform residents about the results of the feasibility study, which makes sense, but will you know the project timetable, the scope, and the estimated costs from that feasibility study? I have no idea.
No, you won't. The feasibility doesn't do that. The next
Okay.
step does that when you
So
have,
maybe we need another public hearing in the next phase. But someone should review all of this for whether this is actually what happens.
yeah.
So do we want to do that before we get too much in the weeds of it? And I think the appropriate person to put it to is the town council.
yeah,
And, procedurally, I don't know if we want to ask him to come to a meeting. That can get a little unwieldy. Just as a proposal, I would be happy to take what Sarah's produced tonight and ask him to look at it and give us written commentary in terms of where it's not working. And then if we think we want to have him come speak, we can do that.
Yeah, and just looking at the big picture here. So we have this April 5th deadline, right? Or it doesn't get in the warrant.
Yeah, but I think I've kind of felt from the beginning, we should ignore that for the best we can. I mean, I think we know that they can do a special town meeting later. I think it's more important that we get it right than we get it done quickly.
Okay. And just point of clarification, if you don't make it by April 5th in the warrant, does that mean it cannot be considered a town meeting, or can you do an insert?
It would be
I think-
I think it would be hard to do it if you didn't make the warrant.
Okay.
But I don't,
It would be like a floor vote.
but
Okay.
does that matter?
No, well, I'm just thinking, and no, I don't want to hurry, and I want to do a very good job. So, a thorough job. So, the town meeting's in May, right? So
are they already planning a special town meeting this year for something?
yeah, that's what I'm just wondering, in order to get.
Are we
the-
gonna need one on the state hospital for the Trinity proposal?
Look, we do have to, that has to come up, but I didn't know if it was in the one schedule for the annual town meeting.
I'm not sure, honestly.
So why don't we, I mean, maybe we can ask Brittany to report back to the group, and it can be on the public page what the options are.
Yeah,
But I would propose that we'd be sensitive to them, but we not have them drive what we do.
Because there is sort of a sense of urgency that the town probably wants to start this committee, sooner than later. They don't want to wait till next town meeting.
I think it's like the old doctor's quote, first rule is do no harm. And so if we muck up the process, that's worse than not doing anything. So-
Right. No, I agree with that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just been so divisive to get it on a good path going forward. And April 7th is the hearing to get input about the project. So it'd be nice not to be too delayed in being able to appoint the next school building committee.
Well, do we want to do this? Do we want to, if Monday, do we want to agree to reconvene next Monday? And that if we really need to, we could try and get in 2 meetings next week. I don't know if people would want to or not. And maybe I can try and get some feedback in writing from the town council on our questions, and maybe Brittany can report back on, if we don't have it done by April, what are the options?
Yeah, I'd just like to know the options and understand that. And I don't know how long Mark would need to, give it a look over and talk about, it in terms of the process.
I dealt with them before through the warrant committee. I would be more than happy to call them tomorrow morning and find out. And I guess I can't report back other than the meeting next week, but I suppose I could ask them to write something.
We get feedback from town council for planning board, and what we do is, someone will inquire and he'll respond with an email that can be transmitted to the group.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay.
I know we only have a couple of minutes and we want to talk about when we're going to have our next meeting, but if we could super quickly go through a couple of the things that are in the permanent building, I think we can knock a couple of them out in 1 second each. Like the things I didn't move over into this draft include a master facilities plan. I think that doesn't apply because this is each formed for a specific building project. Do we agree?
Yes.
So I'm going to take off the master facilities plan. One of them is the consultation with the town facility manager, assessing the current conditions. I think that also isn't applicable because this isn't like a master planning, and we already talked about the town facilities manager being consulted. So I don't think that's relevant.
And they
right?
do that every year. They look at your buildings every year and assess where they are and what it
So I'm
needs
going
to
to delete that. And then the committee can delegate its authority to another board.
I like that.
I don't like that either.
Now, school committee has to own it.
Okay. And then the permanent planning and building committee shall report its progress to the selectmen on an as-needed basis. I don't think that, I think there's already, we're going to build into the process when they have to go back to the select board without just general reporting back. But I guess once the select board appropriates money, do we think they need to report back? Like when you're in the design phase, if that's a 2-year process, do you want them to report to the select board once every 6 months on progress, or?
I think it only helps the community if people are kept abreast of what they are and what they're doing. And I would actually say that they should be reporting to the school committee, not just the select board, right? They got their own members who should be talking about this at all their meetings too, right? Because there's 2 on it, but
how often do you want them to report back? Once every 6 months?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
And I would not be in favor of having one by the vote of 10 people. I don't know if that's in here now or not.
That's another question. I think that if they're open meetings, they report to the school committee and the select board. You just attend one of those meetings.
Yeah, if you're interested, you can have plenty of opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will clean that up. And then that was it. Okay. So I think we dealt with everything in the current PBC. We just need to have someone review the kind of steps of how you move through the process and to what extent we need to incorporate it here or just incorporate by reference what they're supposed to do. So I will clean this up, send around a clean and a red line. And then I think the last question was when we want to meet again.
Can I make a point of order? And I'll have to check. Russ and I, you are as a team are on minutes. I mean, my vote would be for the minutes and we can approve next week. It's what Sarah just produced. I mean, all of our debate and discussion is contained in what got stricken and put back in. I don't know that Russ and I summarizing that really brings a whole lot of value. We can say that there was debate and discussion that's reflected in the edits, but
Well, I think
maybe just a precursor about who attended, what time the meeting started.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of what we actually covered, maybe we can just defer to this.
I don't have an objection to that.
Yeah, that's
There
what we
was,
did. Yeah,
there was a couple of notes, though, relative to discussing the couple of emails, what
Yes.
we might have discussed and discounted and.
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Do,
that's
to
all.
the extent you want to write that up, Russ, have at it. Yeah, please.
I do have some of that here. And I was also gonna, listen to the recording.
Recording.
Okay. So question for meeting next week. Do people have a preference Monday or Tuesday? Someone had a preference for Tuesday at the outset.
I
can't
have
remember who.
planning board every other Monday. I'm just gonna check if I have it next Monday. I think
I mean, maybe
do.
it doesn't make a difference. Maybe we keep Tuesday. I'm not sure the extra day buys us all that much.
well, I don't.
Well, technically,
really-
it's before the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, if we really thought we could have it ready for the 5th, it would matter, but I don't know. I just don't feel like we're there. And I personally don't like to vote on things the night we edit. I think you just want to walk away and come back and look at it. And we would be then voting on the night we're finally editing. And I don't think that's a great practice to do.
So why don't we, why don't,
Just to interrupt you really quickly, Christine and I talked about this today. Not that this might change your opinions at all about anything, but if you do give it to us, or if there's a final-ish version of the 5th and we have review by town council, and you need to review it again for a day or two, that might be okay. But it would have to be in short order after that.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany. Well, why don't we proceed? Why don't we proceed as we've agreed, right? We know what we're going to do. I'll check with town council. Let's schedule a meeting for next week, and then
I could do Monday. I could do like planning board doesn't start till 7:30. I could be a little late, so I could do 7 to 8 on this, and then be late to the planning board if people want to do that. To
It's
try to get.
I'm wide
Is
open.
6:30 is 6:30 too early for people to start? And I respect it for work, it is, but is that an optional starting time?
It's okay for me.
Fine with me, but
Hard, but I can do it.
My husband's going to disagree when I'm in meetings from 6:30 till 10, but I can make it work.
Well, no, we can do 7. If 7's better. we'll
No,
do 7.
no, I mean, the planning board starts at 7:30, so the sooner I can get over to that, the better. So 6:30 is fine.
So do we want to say Monday or Tuesday?
I think Monday, just in case it gives us a fighting chance of the 5th, like,
Okay.
why not meet on Monday?
I mean, if we got a lot from Mark, right? And then Monday we have these final edits, and then we would have 48 hours of post. So if we could do Wednesday for a vote, I mean, we might make it. I just don't know what Mark's
Okay.
going to say, right?
So that sounds like a plan moving forward.
I think it will be worth knowing, Brittany, or whoever talks to Mark, actually, to what extent we can like mark up this not in the meeting. Like, you can all read it and mark it up, and then we can talk about it next Monday night. But can you email your markup? As long as we don't talk about it, you just send it in. You each send in your edit.
I gotta believe if you can publish that on the board, why not? Right? If a
Yeah.
citizen can put commentary on the board, why couldn't we?
Right, so
he
if we
could-
each send comments in, then I could be thinking about it before Monday. Just to try to get closer to resolution on Monday night. If people have comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you post ours that we did tonight, and then you post a different version with all Mark's changes and his thoughts, and then we can comment on it. We're sharing it with everybody. We're not talking, where anyone
each
can look
other.
at it. Right. And then we all have more to read and think about, and that will just make us that, further ahead on Monday.
We can get parameters from Mark and make sure that it's clear, and I will share those with you.
Thank you. All
So
right, we
now-
gotta,
So now we understand that Sarah is going to post somehow with Brittany, I guess, post what
I'm gonna
you all just
email
did
the
tonight.
clean and the red line to Brittany for posting.
Great.
okay, great. Anything further that we need to address tonight before we adjourn?
I just want to say, are we doing any public next Monday or just a working meeting? Are we done public as we did tonight?
My vote would be, we had one public, we had like 1 or 2 people show up. We had it for tonight. We had 1 or 2 people show up. I think we've given an opportunity. My vote would be, let's get this thing as far as we can get it. And if we decide
Okay.
we want more public commentary, but do it then.
All
I
right. but we-
agree, and we are always available to read any email
Right.
commentary ahead
Right.
of time.
So we'll just suggest people do that, is just send the emails to, and then we all can read. Okay, that sounds great.
Right, right.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Second,
All right. And then I vote to approve. Russ,
Approve. Do I have to say
Carol?
something?
Yes.
Carolyn. Okay. Sarah,
Yes.
Cynthia.
yes.
All right. Thank you all. And thank you,
Thank you
Brittany,
all.
for staying so late with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so
care.
much.